So we're just starting with the long feet and the broad back of the pelvis, heavy heels, just feeling behind the balls of the feet, and then just finding the smile at the base of the back of the ribs, and the smile at the back of the head. So as we let these just create space, the weights of the body create space, and we can use them to our advantage. So the heavy head and the heavy jaw and the heavy tongue and all of that stuff that just starts to go back with gravity creates space at the base of the skull and the neck spine. The weights of the arms, if we take those over the body, come back through the sockets, through the shoulder sockets, and create a broadness, but also a lengthening up and down through the back of the rib spine, so we can create space there. It takes us down into the solar plexus. So if we imagined that we just dropped a stone into this space at the base of the ribs, if you take your fingers there and just let the fingers rest at the V shape at the base of the ribs, we've got this lovely, sternum, and then the kind of the W at the front of the ribs. And if we just let the fingers sink there, just noticing if we hold tension there, for many of us we do, it is the house of our boundaries. So if we're feeling like our boundaries or our personal power are being a bit infringed, you might find that this space is a little bit tender, or you might find that this space is a little bit tight. So just take, just be gentle with that, with fingers here. We don't want to go poking things, certainly not poke the bear. But if we felt that we could drop a pebble into this softness at the front of the solar plexus, can we just feel that there's a ripple effect that goes out through the tummy up into the chest and allows the spine just to lengthen in the two directions, through the low spine and through the rib spine. So up and down. And, this is the home of the mesentery, which, for those of you that have been on dissection with me, you'll know, because you'll have seen this. But there is literally a starburst of multi-directional tissue that sits here, and it's quite fabulous to look at, because it mirrors our galaxy, really. It looks just like the stars up in the sky. But can we really feel that as we come right to the very center of that and just let that be pulled down into the ground? If we put a gravity button sort of 3 feet, 6 feet underneath that, and let it be pulled down into the ground, can we feel that there's this softening back? The breath will come in around it, so just noticing how that changes it. The breath changes the nature of everything. The in-breath is expansive and the out-breath is heavy. So, and we have to breathe. It ends badly if we don't. So we need to breathe in and out, but it's noticing the change in dynamics that the breath brings. And there is a practice which is a little too advanced for what we're doing here, but there is a practice that if you leave the breath on the out breath, you can leave the breath out, and you can sit in this solar plexus area for quite some time before the next in breath comes in. So it's just taking time to just feel into that and just notice that with that pebble drop through the solar plexus, as that ripple effects down, starts to affect the pelvis. And we feel that there's this lovely broadness to the back of the pelvis, and it helps the feet go long as well. So from that, we can just take the hands around the back of the head and just introduce the fingers to the back of the head. And we can let the thumbs just slide in behind the ears, underneath the cranial processes, so underneath the base of the skull, you feel those, it's a technical term, bobbly bits at the base of the skull. You can give them a little bit of a massage. You might find that, again, you might find they're a little bit tight, a little bit tense there. So go gently with it, particularly if it's a little bit sore. You just want to really just gently make circly movements with the thumb at this point. And then we can just allow the fingers just to slide around the back of the head. So as the head starts to come into the palms, and we were looking at this in a previous session, you know, this behind the knuckles of the palm and in front of the thumb, and you know that the real deep center of the palm provides a passageway through the arms, through the forearm, through the elbow, through the upper bone of the arm, and into the sockets of the shoulders, and we can trace that all the way into the spine. So as we feel that the head rests in the hands, we can take a little time to do that, because heads are heavy. So as the weight of the head comes into the hands, the hand has to respond. And it responds by there being a spaciousness at the wrist. Can we allow the insides of the elbows to have space? Notice, we've done this before with knees and hips, notice if we close the joint at the elbows. And you want to keep the elbows in line with the eyes. So we're in line with the sides of the eyes, because as soon as the elbows drop out to the sides, we start to pull around on the front of the chest, and that's not what we're looking for. We're actually looking for a head that connects into hands, a hand that connects into elbows, elbows that connect into the underarms, and underarms that connect into the spine. And that gives us a pulling back of the arms through the sockets into the spine, and as the head starts to leave the floor ever so slightly, what we then find is that the back of the head starts to go towards the top of the mat. The jaw starts to slide in towards the back of the head, but you can hear that there's no restriction at the throat, because your voice doesn't change. My voice doesn't change. There is a point, if I pull with the hands, the voice does change because everything gets restricted. So we're looking for that length behind the vocal cords, behind the collarbones, behind the tongue. And it all comes because the humeral bone, the long arm bone at the top of the arm, is going back through the shoulder sockets, through the shoulder blade. So if we thought about this V shape of the arm, we've got a long arm bone that's sort of looking at sort of 3 foot, 6 foot underneath us, under the ground. So it's looking to go back and down. And it's that pulling down of the humerus bone on both sides that starts to lift the head from the floor. So we get ourselves into this sort of slings arrangement where we've got leverage, but it's not using the hands to their detriment, because actually this can be really hard work for hands, because as I say, heads are heavy, and we don't want to stress the joints. So we're looking to send the arms back to their largest muscles, which are in the trunk, of course. But we're also looking to create space in the spine. So can we feel that the head is being pulled out from the heart center? The heart and the lungs, you might feel them drop back. The solar plexus, you might feel it drop back. The tummy, you might feel it all sinking back towards the spine. We're sending the sacrum away. So notice if the sacrum starts to tilt in towards you. We've got sit bones heavy into the ground. Now, it might not be a big movement, and that's okay. In fact, we probably want the smaller movements, those micro movements, as we start to create space into the neck spine and into the top of the ribs, which, you know, sometimes can be a little bit snug, particularly where the neck meets the top of the shoulders. If we're sitting at the desk for large parts of the day, or we're in a prone position for large parts of the day, then it means that we might have tension here. So we're just feeling that we can create space between each individual rib. And we're retaining the curves of the lumbars, the low spine curve, by dropping the front of the snooker ball heel and the sit bones and the back of the pelvis and all of that stuff. So we go down to go long and we go down to come up. We'll turn it into something that looks a little bit like a sit-up at some point, but again, just checking the brain. As soon as it gets involved with something or it thinks we're going somewhere, it starts to change things and employ the muscles that it thinks it wants to do, not what the body wants to do. And these are your exploratory movements. So just as you come back down, if you haven't already, just feeling that each vertebrae can just drop, 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 drop. And we'll start to create some real length at the shoulder blades. So we're just going to work through this once more. If you're just working with the lengthening of the head, it's enough, depending on where you are in your journey. So if you're a little bit further on in your journey, you'll find that the head starts to draw away quite easily, and we've got the spine that's just lengthening away like the rope coming out of the water. And when we've got that, then we're just starting to look at how do we create space at that pebble drop site, space at the solar plexus. So we start to allow the front of the ribs to get drawn into the back of the ribs. And it's the same type of feeling as dropping the long arm bones down through the shoulder blades into the deep part of the ground. We're looking to drop T12, which is the base of the ribs and the top of the lumbars, down about 6 feet into the ground, and that will continue us on in our journey. And we just keep looking at that lengthening, creating space, noticing where we're closing the joints, whether that's closing the joints in the spine or closing the joints at the jaw or in the elbows or in the backs of the knees. We're just being mindful of where those things pop up for us. And again, when we are coming back down to ground, it's that unfurling, sacrum already unfurled away, low spine, and then through the solar plexus, can we just unfurl, 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 all the way back down to the ground. And you will find at some point that the head will reach the knees, depending on how far along you are from your journey. It may be that just the head is coming off the ground at the moment, and that's absolutely fine. It's a long process, years in fact, to look at these things and to get muscles that work in harmony with each other. It's very easy for us to drop into our favourite muscles. So we're just looking at that lengthening and that dropping and that lengthening and that dropping all the way through. Noticing where you run into a bit of a wall, and that's okay. We can breathe and we can relax. And we can let the weight of the head come back into the hands again. Always returning the head back into the hands. The strong muscles around the neck and the front of the chest, always eager to get involved here. But can we keep just quietening them down, dropping back to the spine again and again. So the next time we come down, we're just going to let the arms drop through the sockets and just letting the arms, feeling like someone's got hold of your fingers and they're pulling the fingers up towards the top of the wall above you. And it feels like the arms pull at the ribs, but it just helps us to get some nice length through the solar plexus. We've had it in a bit of a contracted state while we're doing these movements, so we go in the other direction, keep the ribs back towards the spine, keep the arms pulling the sides of the ribs, not out of the sockets. We feel the index finger knuckle, the thumb knuckle, middle finger knuckle all helps to give us that length around the ribs that we're looking for. We're going to take the arms out wide, round and down, elbows somewhere close to the floor if that's possible, backs of the hands maybe close to the floor. And again, just looking for that point of compromise. If the pectorals won't, then the shoulder socket can. So if you're running into resistance in the front of your chest, we can make a couple of circles here. If you're running into resistance in the front of your chest, being mindful that we're not hanging the arms out of their sockets, we're keeping that connection to the very, very centre of the chest as the arms come down towards the hips and can come back up through centre again. Just going to take the feet over to the right side and shift the hips over to the right side, and that just helps us to roll onto the left side. And if you need a pillow under your head, then you can do that. But if you're happy here just to let the head rest on the floor, then you can. In some ways it's better. We want the big toes and the heels together and back towards the back of the body. So just being mindful that we've got a line from the back of the pelvis down to the feet. And we want to just pin the knees together, the insides of the knees together. So we're taking the fingers onto the top of the shoulder and just making nice circles with the elbow and just noticing what's happening in the ribs and shoulder blade, collarbone. And just making those lovely circles, just noticing where we've got lots of slide and glide and where we haven't got so much perhaps. And then the next time we come back to the centre, we're just taking the fingers of the palms together, back of the hand and the underside hand stays on the floor. Fingers stay towards the floor as much as possible. Again, we've got that long arm bone coming back through the socket into the ribs. We're imagining that the arm is connected to the spine. It's not connected to the shoulder. It goes in much deeper than we're used to. So just taking, like somebody's got hold of your index finger knuckle and is just holding your hand and taking the arm up towards the top of your head and then out behind you. This is a rib rotation movement. So if it's nice to get the hand on the solar plexus, on the front of the ribs again, then you can do that, because we're looking at some point, maybe not today, and that's okay, but we're looking at some point to get the two shoulder blades on the floor as the arm comes out behind you, round, and then back over the hip and back to the centre. So again, big toes in the inside of the heels together, knees together. We want to keep them that way. So we notice those points of compromise. Where are we hanging the arm out of the socket? Where do the knees start to come apart? And we keep looking back to the underarm, front of the chest, front of the tummy, to give us the softness that we're looking for that rotation. And it might be that it's a little bit snug in there, and that's okay. This isn't a movement that we do very often anymore in our modern life. Let the jaw rest into the back of the head. The head just rolls, which is why it's nice to have it on the floor. Obviously, if that's not comfortable, put it on a pillow. But eventually what we want to have is that nice roll of the back of the head, which disconnects the jaw, keeps everything nice and soft. We're going to do one more rotation here as we start to feel that things free up. And we're coming back to the centre. If you haven't got a pillow under your head, just placing your left hand under your head. And again, just letting the weight of the head rest. Oh, that's going to do something bad to my microphone. let the weight of the head rest into the hand. And we feel the connection of the head, the hand, the arm through the socket into the waist. We're going to take the top arm and just place the hand in front of your chest. And just lean into it a little bit. So we get the hand used to being on the floor. And we're feeling that broadness in the back of the ribs. We're dropping the shoulders away from the ears, and we just keep coming back into the heart center, behind the heart and behind the lungs. So from again, from that solar plexus, we're going to feel like that top foot, big toe joint and the inside of the heel. There are, real main focus points of the feet. We want to be in there most of the time. We feel like somebody's got hold of those 2 points of the foot, and they're just going to draw the foot away towards the end of your mat, pulling the leg out from the hip, from the solar plexus, side of the waist. It all just gets pulled away, pulled away, pulled away, pulled away. So we start to really feel that we've got this hip bone, and you can get your hand in there if it feels nice just to notice what's happening there. For a lot of us, we don't have much length to the waist. Our sitting position on a daily basis, whether that's in the car, on the sofa or at the desk or wherever it is, negatively impacts the waist in that it just starts to go into the systematic collapse. So we're looking to use the leg to pull the pelvis away and to pull the waist long. And you'll feel that in the front tummy, you'll feel that in the top of the hip and in between the ribs and the waist there. We want to create that long space. At some point, the hand is going to have to go back at the front of your body to provide some stability for you. Feeling like the inside of the heel being pulled away to the end of your mat, and we can just take the heel back towards the mat behind you, towards the edge of the mat behind you. And then we're just going to take the toe, the big toe joint, forwards towards the mat in front of you, towards the edge of the mat in front of you. So we're just noticing that the hip doesn't move. We've got this lovely broad hip, we've got this lovely long waist, and the leg is just pulling out of the hip and making this beautiful arch shape. If you're anything like me, just noticing that top shoulder isn't sneaking up round your ear. Relax the jaw, relax the head, all of those bits and pieces that might be trying to get involved instead of this movement, instead of the core, central core muscles. So we're just going to do one more arch here with the hips nice and still. Particularly as the foot goes back, we don't want to be dropping into the low spine. So notice if the low back starts to arch at some point. Where is the line for that? There's a point where it's all core muscles, all core muscles, all core muscles, and then all of a sudden the skeleton starts getting pulled around. And it's just to notice where that is. We're just going to take this heel and just make little circles. We're keeping the hips nice and still. So if it needs a hand on the hip to make sure that that's actually happening, we start with little circles, making them into big circles in one direction. We can make spirals. And then we'll just take that in the other direction. Leg might be getting quite tired now, so just retaining that integrity as much as you can. Look to the underside foot and the hip and the underside shoulder for all the stability that you need and the strength that you're looking for. And then we're just going to fold that leg back in. Big toes and the heels together and the hips together and the knees together. We're sending that hip long and away. If you're anything like me, the hip just loves to fold in and crumple the waist quite nicely. So if it needs a little bit of manual assistance, then stay with that. We're going to pull down with the hip and the big toe, the heel and the big toe joint. We're going to pull that down into the underside heel and big toe joint, and we find that the knees then can make a nice clamshell. Pelvis, as I say, doesn't move. It's just the rotation of the hip in the hip socket. Back of the pelvis, feeling like we've got that hand at the back of the pelvis supporting us. Hand at the back of the solar plexus supporting us. We've got an actual hand around the back of the head which is supporting you. But we're just making that nice open and closing movement. Just like the movement that we do when we're laying on our backs on the floor. So we're looking to feel that on the inside of the pelvis, on the inside of the hip and the inside of the waist. It should be quite hard work. And then bringing the knees back to the centre. I'm going to change over onto the other side. So just returning onto your back, giving the knees a nice hug. I'm going to go around this end like this so that I can still see you. And we're just starting again with the arms out in front, head on the floor or head on the pillow, whichever feels good. And the toes and the heels together, and the knees together, and just having the feet back so that they're in line with the back of your body, in line with your sit bones. And once we've got ourselves nice and comfortable here, we're just taking the fingers up onto the shoulder and making a nice circle with the elbow. And again, just noticing where are the sensations, what's happening with the collarbone, how much is the shoulder blade moving, how much space have we got into the underarm. There's all sorts of questions going on in here. Noticing where the sensations are. Where do we run into resistance? So after making a few circles just with the elbow, we can take the fingers out in front and we're just leaving the fingers as close to the floor as possible, but they don't have to stay there. We want to keep that long arm bone coming back through the socket so the head can roll as the ribs roll. And the shoulder blade starts to come down to the ground. And you know, the first one or two, particularly if this isn't a movement that we're familiar with, it just takes time. So for the tissues to respond. So let the index finger knuckle, as the arm comes up over top of the head, let the index finger knuckle rest into the floor, because it will send the long arm bone back into the deep waist. And it may be that this is the slightly tighter side for you, and that's okay, because we just work with what we have. Again, just noticing what's happening in the underarms. So important that we get movement here on a regular basis. It's good for the lymph and the blood works, as well as lots of other things. If you know that your head is starting to come forwards a little bit more than you would like in standing, or you feel that you're losing height a little bit as you go on through the different stages of life, then this is the place where you put that space back where it came from. So it's so important that we do this. So we're going to come back to the centre. I'm going to take that underarm or the lower hand under the head, and the top hand in front of the chest somewhere. And we're just taking that top leg again, just feeling that, you know, these are reworkings for the mind, that your leg doesn't finish at your hip, it finishes at your solar plexus, that your arms don't finish at the shoulder, that they finish at the spine. And actually your arms are buttoned in at every vertebrae from the back of your head to the back of your pelvis, so they cover a lot. The legs are the same, they cover the whole of the low spine, right up into the underside of the ribs. The whole lot's capped off by the diaphragm, so we look like Lego people. So when we're feeling that this foot is getting pulled away towards the end of the mat, it naturally pulls the bones of the pelvis with it, naturally gives us this long waist. And we just want to experience that. So just feeling that the big toe joint, feeling like somebody's got hold of that and they're pulling it away, the inside of the heel being pulled away, this activates the inner thigh. So for a lot of us, we prefer the outer thighs and the glutes and those big hip muscles, but actually we want the inner thigh, the inside of the knee, the inner thigh and the pelvic floor to be involved in this as well. And those muscles that lay up the inside of the spine. So when it feels nice to start making your arch shape, then you can do that. Don't lose the underside foot. I just did. So the long little toe side of the underside foot pulls down into the ground, gives us that stability, that anchor that we want to be working from. It's interesting, as soon as we come into something that looks like hard work or muscles that we're not overly familiar with, it's almost like stuff starts to lift off the floor in response. So you might find that the head becomes light, shoulder might become light, hip becomes light, foot becomes light on the floor, all in a bid to support. We keep sending ourselves back to the waist. The longer the leg out of the waist, the more the waist gets involved, the less the rest of the body has to get involved, the less the big muscles of the shoulders and all of those other things that can be a bit niggly because they overwork so much. So the next time we come back to the centre, just going to make those nice circles, feeling like the heel is getting pulled away. Challenge ourselves a little bit. We start with small circles, going into bigger circles in one direction. You can feel the work here and it's good, so stay with it. And then we're going to go in the other direction, so starting small circles. You might find that one side is stronger than the other, so work with what you have. Keep coming back to the heavy head, the heavy ribs, the heavy hip and the heavy foot on the other side. Making those big circles small again. And then just folding that leg back in, heels and toes meet each other, knees meet each other. And we can just work with our little clamshell movement here. Rather than trying to lift the knee, it's a pull down of the sole of the foot on the top foot. It's a pull down of the big toe joint and the inside of the heel into the foot underneath. Remember, we've got that imaginary hand at the back of the pelvis, gives you support. Imaginary hand at the back of the solar plexus. Of course, you have got a hand around the side back of your head, so that can give you support. Can we sit back into those supports? Lean back into those supports. So the joint becomes the facilitator of movement, not the driver. And we're just going to do a couple more here. And bringing the knees back together. Just going to press down into that top foot comes down onto the ground, just pressing into that and returning ourselves onto our back. And just re-establishing that connection down through the feet. We're just going to let the feet get pulled down into the ground. Let the pelvis tilt, let the low spine go nice and long, all of that stuff. Let the front of the body just fall back into the back body. Something like our bridge starts to appear from here, but we come up because we go down. We've got shin bones that are looking sort of 3 feet, 6 feet into the ground. We've got thigh bones that are going back through the hips, 3 feet, 6 feet into the ground. Everything is the pull down, which then pulls the pelvis, pulls the spine, like the wet rope coming out of the water. And it's just a process of walking up through the inside of the spine, just noticing front of the chest, heart and the lungs, voice box. The descent is the same. Can we drop everything back, 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 back? And we've got that spine like kinetic raindrops. So just a couple of those here, just to take the spine in a different direction. Notice if your bridge pose is a little easier for the work that you've done with the connecting the legs into the waist. Maybe that the arms come up over the head, but we're not too worried about that. So the next time we come down, we're just going to let the knees float in towards you. Just taking a little rock from side to side. We're just coming over onto whichever side is comfortable for you. And just returning up to sitting for a moment. More so I can do my hair actually than anything else. We're in a hair break. Hang on. And some glasses so I can see you. And a microphone. Right, so just setting ourselves back up. And just coming round onto our into our square pose. So just having the hands underneath the shoulders. And the knees underneath the hips. So we just start by finding the hands again. We're behind the knuckles, pointy parts of the elbows looking back towards the thighs. You know, it's very easy for us to have elbows out to the sides, but that changes the little bit like we were doing on the when we were cradling the head. We look at different muscle firing sequences. So when the elbows are out to the side, that takes us into this top line, top of the forearm, top of the arm and into the top of the shoulder, side of the neck. But when we swing the pointy part of the elbow round, so it's looking back towards the thigh, it drops us back into the side of the ribs, into the back side of the arm. So we really start to work with triceps, the rudely called bingo wings, but they are not. Just muscles that aren't used as much, and they are subject to a bit more gravity than the biceps on the front. But we can start to just feel, it's like we're swinging the elbows round to look at the thighs, and we're gripping a beach ball between the arms, so it's nice and soft. We're just gripping that beach ball with the inner sides of the elbows and just rolling it forwards ever so slightly. If you know that you're hypermobile, you want to check the orientation of it, check the elbows at this point that you haven't gone past the joint. So if you're just learning that stuff, then it's a visual connection, and eventually it becomes felt sense. But starting to understand where the elbow joints finish optimally rather than the range that's available to us. And when we're very flexible, we're hypermobile, there is no backstop to the elbow. So we want to start creating this real strength to the back side of the arm and the side of the ribs. It's going to support us. It's going to support the head in later life as well. So it's just from here, finding the feet, behind the balls of the feet, front of the ankles again, pulling down into the ground. So the tops of the feet are pulling down into the ground, which starts to space out the toe bones. We get nice length to the feet here. And again, we're just coming back to the solar plexus. Changed our orientation slightly at this point, but can we just imagine that there's a pool there, right up underneath the ribs and extending down into that real top part of the tummy, that there's a body of water there that's just fluid and soft. If we dropped a pebble into here, we would have ripples that go all the way down into the back of the pelvis, and we'd have ripples that go all the way up through the inside of the chest, into the neck, into the back of the head. We've got a lovely spaciousness that starts to happen into the ribs, and our cat pose is spontaneous in here, because all cat pose is a spinal elongation, it's a spinal awareness. So as we drop the pebble into that real center point of the body and those ripples come out, we can feel that there's a response to the low spine, and as the low spine lengthens, the tail will tuck under. But we keep into the front part of the spine, we keep into the solar plexus in order to do that. Notice if the legs start to get involved, and can we drop back down into the feet again? Relax the quads, the hip flexors. That ripple effect that goes up from the solar plexus into the chest will lift the chest. It slides up between the shoulder blades that just move out of the way to facilitate that, and then we can walk up the inside of the neck. The jaw naturally starts to come in towards the back of the head, which lengthens the neck out. Just like we were doing with the hands around the back of the head. There's no difference, we've just changed our orientation to the floor. And we feel that the hands and the shins get pulled quite strongly down into the floor. We get pulled down, and that's what causes the upward movement. We go down to come up always. Just keep working through here. That lift and drop of the chest, although it might be elusive at first, is useful, because as soon as we've got that lift and drop of the chest, it starts to take the weight out of the hands. So if it's tricky here for hands, and for most of us, the hands and the wrists are not, they're a little bit underused. Let's put it that way. They're a little bit underused. So we keep getting them back on the floor. We keep going back into behind the knuckles. Make the space by making circles with the wrists. Make the space by making circles with the elbows. There's a lovely study coming out at the moment. I'm going to put it in the WhatsApp group. You will not like it. It is all about how your grip strength through your life determines your longevity. And if your hands are weak, you're going to die. All these studies end with, your untimely death. But, and it's not the case, but it gives us a window of opportunity. We can intervene. So keep coming back into that. Can we lift and drop the chest smoothly between the shoulder blades? And you might find, and this is if you're a little bit further on in your journey, you will find that that lift with the chest and the smoothing of the front of the body into the back body will take you back. The hands pulling down into the ground will take you back. Get lots and lots of space into the underarms. The chest moves back. And then it's your choice. It's a bit like choose your own adventure, depending on how you're feeling today. So, you know, choose your own adventure. The sit bones also feeling like they've got somebody gripping onto them, pulling them back towards the wall. So we keep the tail high and there's no rounding under of the back of the pelvis. At some point, you're going to run into the legs. So it either becomes a child pose or we can tuck the toes under and take that back into our whatever it's called, dog pose. There you go, it's in there somewhere. So we start to find our dog pose, but it's a very light and lifty dog pose. And again, for those of us that are a little further on, if you want to take your dog for a walk, you're looking for your arms to extend. And if you're not sure what on earth I'm going on about, you can have a quick look at the screen. We're looking for, hang on, start at the beginning. We find our way back into our dog pose because we've got legs that don't finish at the hip, we've got legs that finish at the solar plexus, and we've got arms that finish, well, they don't finish, they're just buttoned in at the spine. So when we're taking our dog for a walk, we're looking at that rotation of the ribs, and the arm is very much connected to front of the chest and the back of the body, and the leg as well is coming through the side of the waist. So it's quite animally. It's called a dog pose. So yeah, obviously it's animally. So just playing with those movements, you know, pretending that we can be a dog. And for those of us that have got dogs, they're great to watch. Cats as well, if they're having a run across the garden, not that they do that very often, but just looking at how their limbs are very much connected to the spine. Can we mimic that? Can we replicate that? For the rest of us mere mortals who are just back in our child pose or our cat pose, absolutely fine. And if the wrists are grievous, if you haven't already, you know, do take a rest. You can do all of this stuff on your forearms. You can come down onto the forearms and let the pointy parts of the elbows, which act as, you know, another reference point for the hands, but the pointy parts of the elbows can pull down into the ground. Forearms can pull down into the ground. It's exactly the same as the shins and the feet at the other end of the body. Same thing, different limb. And the more we can get the pull down with that, it's the same thing. We create space into the underarm, space into the downside of the outer side of the ribs, takes us all the way back. And we start to find these connected spine movements. It's hard work, but it's worth it. Noticing where we run into points of resistance. Noticing your head, the orientation of the head. As soon as we look down, tail tucks under. So you want to be keeping your head at the top of the spine with your jaw wrapped around the back of the head, eyes into the back of the head, all of that stuff. It's all dropping back, which gives us a lovely spaciousness to the neck and frees the low spine by the same hand. Is good, Diana. So just feeling that the front of the ribs can just smooth back towards the spine, and that will take the hips back again and let space into the underarms a little bit more. Let the jaw come back into the back of the head. Crown of the head is looking towards your hands. Can we create space there? It's good. So the next time we're coming back down, going to come up to standing, so just taking the toes down into the ground. If if you haven't already. You find your own way up to standing, whatever feels good, and it is different for everyone. Getting on and off the floor is so important. So whether that's a step through, or whether that's working back through your squat pose, you know, finding that way, the more space and flexibility we have in the feet, the more space and flexibility you have in the hip. So we need the soft feet. And being mindful of the back of the knee, because we don't need the joint to be closed. So we've always got that nice upward lift. So we're coming all the way up to standing. And just finding the feet. So just noticing at this point how the feet feel. Front of the snooker ball heel, behind the balls of the feet. A little bit like the elbows. Can we keep the knee soft? Can we make a spaciousness into the back of the knee? Where is our body weight falling when it's coming down through feet? Can we keep the sit bones lifting? So we feel like we've got our sit bones in that bit of a sling. It might feel like we're poking our bottom out a little bit, but for a lot of us, the pelvis is quite tilted under. So just let that lift so that we feel that we've got a spaciousness that happens in the low spine. Underside of the ribs can lift and the legs feel like they hang down. So again, can we find that space at the front of the solar plexus? Can we find that spaciousness at T12 at the base of the ribs, back of the top of the lumbars? There's a little movement that you can do here with your fingers. If you put your knuckles into the back of your ribs here, just at the base of the ribs, top of the lumbars, and what you can do is you can just take the knuckles apart, just really gently, just let them sink into your back and just take them apart, and it helps to just, you can feel that there's a spaciousness that starts to open up there. It's subtle, but it's useful. So it's just letting that sink and move. Does that make sense? Oh, they're going, I have no idea what she's on about. It's a place of in a lot of us it's quite sleepy. But it is the root of your legs. So if this is a part of us that's sleepy, another part of the legs has got to work far, far harder, and it tends to be the hip. Yeah, if solar plexus doesn't, hips can, and they turn into Atlas holding up the weight of the world because the rest of the body's sitting on top of them. But actually we've got this beautiful space here, like I say, this multi-directional starburst, looks like our galaxy, in the centre of us, and it's expanding, it's moving in all different directions all the time. Changes the game. Now if you find that the shoulders are getting involved, they like that. And if you find that the hip muscles are getting involved, that happens as well, because, you know, we're going for a place that some of us are a little bit not so connected to. So when we're here now, if we take the elbows out to the side, can we imagine that we've got helium balloons under the arms? We're letting the feet sink. So feet get pulled down into the ground, and can we just start to feel like we can pull the floor apart with the feet? You'll feel everything start to engage all the way through the legs, all into the lower part of the body, and that just helps that to stabilise. We've got these nice balloons under the arms, and if we just rest our arms on those balloons, because balloons are full of helium and they're rising, they're just pushing the elbow up. So just follow that. It's a bit of visualisation involved, but it's different to lifting the arms over the head. If we feel that we've got that support, and we were talking about this in the other session, you know, biting the lemon. If you really imagine the lemon and you think about the lemon with its yellow colour and the juice of the lemon and all of this stuff, and you're gearing up to take a bite, and all of a sudden you start salivating, but there is no lemon. And it's the same with the arms out to the sides. We can imagine, because our mind is that powerful, we can imagine that we've got this helium balloon under the arm that just floats the elbows up, 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 up. And there's a point where we run out of room with the elbows, and then the hands can go as well. And it's like somebody's got hold of the hands, and if it's nice to take hold of one hand with your other hand, then you can do that just to give it some guidance. I like holding hands with myself, it's nice. You know, your body's your best friend. You're together for life, so, you know, hold hands with it. So we just feel that, again, the arms are getting pulled down, the roots of the arms going back down into the solar plexus, and the arms can just float. So we get pulled down to go up. So we've got lots and lots of lovely space at the shoulders. Notice a point where the trapezius kicks in. If the top of the shoulders starts to come in and we're going up around the ears, that's an old pattern. It's not useful. We want to get rid of that if we can, because it causes stiff shoulders and tight necks and all of that stuff. So just going back to that, can I rest? Can I rest my arms on my helium balloons? So it's the elbows. Maybe we can imagine strings on the elbows getting pulled up towards the sky. So there's a lot going on in the underarm side of the ribs, side of the waist. And we'll let the arms, if you haven't already, making sure there's nothing around you, we're going to give the arms a nice side to side. And then really making sure there's nothing around you, animals, ornaments and all of that stuff. We're just going to take the arms round your body. So again, let the feet pull down into the ground and separate the floor slightly, so that just gives us that nice stability. You'll find that we get much more. It's interesting, if you let your legs go floppy, disconnect your feet from the floor and do your movement, it's a whole body movement. There's nothing wrong with it. Whole body movement, but notice what's going on in the knees. And then pull your feet down into the floor and feel like you can pull the floor apart, same movement. Different part of the body. Now we're back into the core structures, back into the shoulder rib structures again. Good, so we're just going to let that come to rest. Arms just come to rest at the side. And we're going to come back down. Just finding a sitting position that's comfortable. If you need to have your sofa behind you, or you want to be against the wall, or you want, what do you call it, cushion underneath you, all of that stuff. So, sit bones, and it doesn't matter where you have your legs. Legs can be out in front, legs can be folded in towards you, it doesn't matter. What we are interested in is the pull of the sit bones and the pubic bone at the front, which gives us that nice tail lift at the back, because the tail is a roof, the sacrum is a roof, it's not a back wall. So when we're rolled under in this way, throws the head forwards, you can see that really easily. So we pull the sit bones and the pubic bone at the front, get a gravity button underneath those, pull that down. And it pulls us up out of the pelvis. You'll feel those muscles that we've been working on in the waist, you'll feel those pulling up into the underside of the ribs. And we can just rest the hands somewhere. If the feet are out in front of you, you want the heels, so make sure that your feet aren't completely floppy. We want the heels pulling down into the ground, big toe joints going forwards, sends the legs back through the waist, through the hips into the waist. The legs are underneath you, long little toe sides get pulled down into the ground. And again, that forms the sling around the back of the pelvis. So can we just breathe here? So again, the breath changes the conditions of the body. The breath in is expansive, light and lifting, and the breath out is contracting, draws us back down into the ground. So we keep dropping into the back of the pelvis, the back of the ribs, and the back of the head. And can we let the washing breath just roll up and roll down the spine? It's good. We're just going to give the fingers and toes a wiggle. Make some rotations with the wrists and the ankles. We're taking the legs long and the arms up over the head for a nice stretch through the body. And bringing the knees into the chest, giving the knees a nice hug. And just taking a moment to check in with yourself and notice how you feel. Good. You've worked hard today, lovelies. Go gently with yourselves. It's been a pleasure as always.